1. Tariffs hidden impact. What the flat PPI doesn't show. 2. Understanding the impact of tariffs on consumer prices. 1. Tariffs hidden impact. What the flat PPI doesn't show. When it comes to economic data, appearances can be deceiving. A flat producer price index, PPI, might give the impression that the US economy is sailing smoothly despite recent tariff implementations. But here's where it gets controversial. Does a stagnant PPI really mean the country is unscathed? Let's dig deeper into what this metric actually tells us, and what it doesn't. Picture this: a worker arc welding a metal door at a manufacturing facility in Sacramento, California, on a typical Tuesday morning in May 2025. This image captures the essence of American manufacturing, an industry directly tied to the PPI. In June 2025, the US Producer Price Index remained unchanged from May, indicating no movement in wholesale prices over that period. At first glance, this could suggest that tariffs imposed under former President Donald Trump are having less of an impact than many anticipated. After all, if manufacturers aren't raising prices, doesn't that imply stability? Well, not so fast. Here's the catch: the PPI measures prices at the manufacturer level, specifically, those produced domestically. According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, imports are excluded because they aren't generated by US-based firms. So, while the PPI staying flat may seem reassuring, it doesn't tell the whole story. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, on the other hand, paints a different picture. Unlike the PPI, the CPI accounts for all goods and services purchased by consumers, including imported items. As the BLS points out, imports make up a significant portion of certain CPI components, such as apparel and new cars. Take June's CPI numbers as an example. While new vehicle prices dipped slightly by 0.3%, clothing costs rose by 0.4%. These fluctuations hint that tariffs may already be influencing specific segments of consumer spending. However, we are likely only seeing the tip of the iceberg. The full brunt of these trade policies may not become evident until after August 1st, when updated tariffs are set to take effect, assuming Trump adheres to his stated timeline. And this is the part most people miss: economic indicators like the PPI and CPI don't always align neatly. They measure different things and serve distinct purposes. For businesses and policymakers, understanding these nuances is crucial. But for everyday consumers trying to gauge how tariffs affect their wallets, the disconnect between these indices can create confusion. So, who should you trust? And how do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory signals? Now let's shift gears to another fascinating development happening beneath the surface, literally. Tech giants Meta and Google are weaving a vast network of subsea cables across the globe. Why? To meet skyrocketing demands for bandwidth and support the growing complexity of artificial intelligence workloads. Researchers at Oxford Internet Institute note that these companies have grown so large that they can now independently finance projects once reserved for consortiums. It's a bold move that underscores just how much power big tech wields today. But consider this: as Meta and Google expand their infrastructure dominance, what does it mean for smaller players in the tech space? Could this concentration of resources stifle innovation or create monopolistic tendencies? These are questions worth pondering and debating. So, what's your take? Do you think these massive investments will ultimately benefit society, or do they signal potential risks we should address sooner rather than later? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 2. Understanding the impact of tariffs on consumer prices. Brace yourself. The protective buffer that companies built to shield themselves from the shock of rising tariffs is starting to unravel, and the consequences could soon hit your wallet. At the beginning of the year, many businesses raced to stock up on goods before the Trump administration's new tariffs kicked in, hoping to dodge the immediate price hikes that would follow. This strategic stockpiling not only helped companies avoid higher import costs for a while, but it also kept consumer prices relatively stable. But here's where it gets controversial. Just 3 months after the first round of tariff announcements in April, those carefully built reserves are running low. Companies are now forced to replenish their inventories, but this time, they're paying much steeper prices. The very businesses that managed to sidestep tariffs for a few months are now left with no alternative but to restock at higher costs. It's almost inevitable that import prices will climb, even though some White House officials have argued that foreign exporters will shoulder the entire burden of tariffs. And this is the part most people miss: whether or not these increased costs get passed on to consumers, and by how much, will shape the real impact of tariffs on the US economy. Economists are left puzzling over these questions, trying to predict what's next for American households and businesses. Everyone was trying to get ahead of the tariffs, buying goods at what was essentially a discount compared to future prices, explained Dreeden Pence, Chief Investment Officer at Pence Capital Management. Once those stockpiles are depleted, the US will be fully exposed to the new tariff reality. Companies won't be able to rely on old inventory to cushion the blow. They'll have to make tough choices, either raise prices for consumers or accept shrinking profit margins. For the Federal Reserve, this will finally reveal the true effects of tariffs. If companies hike prices and inflation rises, a rate cut becomes less likely. But if businesses slash costs elsewhere, perhaps through layoffs, unemployment could rise, making a rate cut more probable. Want to know which products might show the first signs of inflation? Keep an eye on basic consumer goods like clothing, toys, furniture, and especially cars, since so many auto parts are imported. Earlier this week, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released its June inflation report, showing prices up 2.7% over the past year, right in line with expectations. But dig a little deeper, and you'll see some categories, like apparel and home furnishings, jumped by 0.4% and 1% respectively. Deutsche Bank called this clear evidence of tariff pass-through into core goods data. The prospect of pricier clothes and household items suggests that companies can no longer rely on the cheaper, pre-tariff inventory they stockpiled earlier in the year. According to Jake Schermeyer, a portfolio manager at Harbor Capital and former Federal Reserve Bank of New York staffer, these inventories could be gone in just 1 to 2 months. I think, for the most part, companies will soon be working through the last of that inventory, he said. But here's a twist that could spark debate. Dreeden Pence argues that basic goods like t-shirts or toys have flexible supply chains, making it easier for companies to shift production to countries with lower tariffs. This means these items might not be the best indicators of long-term inflation. The less capital you need, the easier it is to move production, Pence noted. Instead, he suggests focusing on the prices of imported components for finished goods, especially auto parts. Cars, with their complex, global supply chains, are a prime example. You have to look at what percentage of a finished product is made up of tariffed components, Pence said, predicting that car prices will likely rise in the third and fourth quarters of the year. Interestingly, the latest inflation report showed car prices actually dropped 0.3% compared to last year. Car manufacturers are currently walking a tightrope. Demand is uncertain, making it tough to raise prices, even as their costs are set to increase. So, what do you think? Will companies absorb these higher costs, or will consumers end up footing the bill? Is it fair to expect businesses to simply move production to avoid tariffs? Or is that easier said than done? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with the experts, or do you see things differently? This debate is far from over, and your perspective could add a whole new dimension to the conversation.